Hey, it's Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online U.S. History from 1877 to present. Today we're going to talk about lesson number 6 in Unit 9, the New Deal. And what we're going to talk about, of course, the New Deal's legacy in terms of what is left behind in American society today. So when you look at the New Deal's legacy, the first thing that we're going to talk about, of course, is the unit focus question. And we won't, of course, go over the answer to the unit focus question, but we want you to be aware of what it is so it can kind of guide your thought process as we go through and we look at this particular lesson, this particular unit. Should government take on the role of provider for its people in times of economic upheaval? Once again, keep that in mind as we go through this particular lesson and as we went through, of course, the prior lessons, and we're going to answer that at the end. Vocabulary, of course, what you should do is take out your journals and write down all these particular words and define them. We'll try to address as many of them as we can as we go, but in case we miss one, make sure that you go through and identify and define them yourself. We have lesson focus questions, of course, but for this lesson 6, and it's 2 particular questions that we will be addressing. What lasting effect did the New Deal have on the United States, and what ultimately ended the New Deal? And unlike the unit focus question, we will address the answer to these particular questions. Journal topic, so if you will, take out your journals, and in that journal, what we want you to do is, does the term scheme evoke a positive or a negative connotation to you, and why? So what we want you to do is take a few minutes, go through and write that particular topic down, of course, and address that particular question, question, and we'll come back in a few minutes, of course, and address it ourselves. So take that time right now. Well, we're back. Now, you should have had enough time that you were able to go through a course and identify what that word scheme means. Well, scheme, to me, is one of those words that kind of tells you something kind of shady. So I'm giving you a synonym here. So if I say a scheme, I think about some kind of shady activity. And when you look at the shady activity we're going to be talking about is what Roosevelt does, FDR does, to address the Supreme Court attacking his New Deal. So what we're going to do, of course, is move on. And what we want you to know is that in 1936, FDR won, the presidency in another landslide. And because of that landslide, remember what we said, it gives him a mandate, which means he has the support of the American public. And then those congressmen, the House of Representatives and the Senate, who are also elected, of course, by the American public, they have spoken by giving him a mandate, meaning that when FDR asks them to do something, they should listen to what FDR has to say, because if not, then they may not get elected the next time around. So that support gave him standing to fight the Supreme Court and the opponents, of course, to the New Deal, especially the Supreme Court. The most dangerous critic of the New Deal was the U.S. Supreme Court. Some justices argue that the New Deal overextended the executive branch's power and reached into the legislative branch, and those challenges led to some New Deal programs being declared unconstitutional. In other words, some people believe that the president, in this case FDR, had too much power. He was exercising too much overreach. So in looking at it, one of the things that they want to do, of course, is to restrict the presidential power. So a lot of the New Deal programs, of course, will come under attack, especially the National Recovery Act. The National Recovery Act, of course, is going to be declared unconstitutional. And because it's declared unconstitutional, that's a sign to Roosevelt that he needs to do something to ensure that the rest of the New Deal, of course, is not going to be affected. See, the Supreme Court is different from the Congress. The people in the Congress had to pay attention to what FDR says because he had to support the American public. The Supreme Court justices were appointed for life, and because they're appointed for life, they're not pressured by what the American public, of course, would want. So when it comes to the U.S. Supreme Court and the attack of the New Deal, it is their power, of course, is not really checked at all. The court packet scheme is what Roosevelt comes up with, and there's that word scheme is. And when we say scheme, of course, is some kind of shady activity, or at least that people look at as being some kind of shady activity. The court packet scheme was FDR's attempt to add more justices to the court who were favorable to the New Deal. So since they're appointed for life, I can't remove them unless they retire or they die. So, and if there are more of them on the court, of course, that don't support FDR, that means that the New Deal, of course, is in danger. So what FDR does in his brilliance is he comes up with this idea to add more justices to the Supreme Court and add people on the court to support him and the New Deal. It doesn't work out that way, though. And the biggest reason why it didn't work out that way is because we're going to find that even some people in his own Democratic Party don't get behind the court packing scheme. And the biggest people, or the biggest majority of people in the Democratic Party that did not support him were the Southern Democrats. And the Southern Democrats didn't want him to add people to the Supreme Court because they felt like that after he protected the New Deal, the next thing that FDR might do is use the Supreme Court to attack segregation. The New Deal legacy. In the eyes of its critics, it made the U.S. a welfare state with its citizens dependent on relying on a government safety net, and made government too big and expansive in citizens' lives. Supporters of the New Deal would say it made America more responsive to the needs of its people by addressing economic concerns when citizens couldn't, which created confidence in the American government. So, when you look at the New Deal, two things that it does. Number one, it makes American government larger. And it makes American government larger because you have all these different programs. And there were a lot of people that didn't like the idea, especially Republicans, because the Republicans liked small government and they liked laissez-faire with the government, of course, didn't get involved in business. So we're going to have this debate now in the country between the Democrats, of course, and the Republicans, and what the size and what the scope of, or the size and scope, and then the responsibility of government, of course, is going to be. And that's going to lead to a lot of issues, and you won't be able to find a presidential election after 1936 where these are not the two central issues between the two parties. You know, the size and scope of government and how much responsibility does the government have, of course, to its people. What we're going to do, of course, is take about 20-25 minutes and we're going to look at this particular worksheet. And what it does is it talks about the impact of the New Deal. There will be 7 questions that we want you to answer based on this particular worksheet. Of course, you can complete it and turn it in, of course, to your teacher to be graded. And when you look at the New Deal, we talked about the legacy of it, and it changes things. It changes things, of course, in the country for a long time. So what we'll do, of course, is give you an opportunity, of course, to look at the questions on this particular worksheet, give you 15-25 minutes or so to answer those questions, and we'll come back at that time. At the end of that time, of course, then we will talk about what some of your responses are. Okay, we're back. Now, in looking at that worksheet, the impact of the New Deal, one of the things that we want you to do, once again, we're not going to go over all of this. What you can do, of course, is navigate to the end of the slide presentation and get the full answers, but we will take a couple of them and look at them and give you an idea about some of the answers that you should have been trying to come up with. Let's give you an easy one. It says number 3, list the entitlements that the United States government provides for its people today. Well, 3 that we already talked about a little bit, of course, Social Security, of course, would be one of those entitlements. Another entitlement, of course, would be Medicare, which provides health insurance, of course, to people who are 65 years of age or older. And then Medicaid. Medicaid, of course, to give insurance, of course, to people, of course, who are disabled, or to children who are from poor or disadvantaged, of course, households. So when you look at entitlements, entitlements are programs that are created by the government that every American citizen who qualifies is entitled to have. Once again, if you want to see the rest of your answers, you can navigate to the end of the slide presentation and look at that particular worksheet and the answer key that accompanies it. All right, let's look at the lesson focus questions for Unit 9, lesson number 6. It says, what lasting effect did the New Deal have on the United States? And then, what ultimately ended the New Deal? Well, when we look at both of those particular answers, we're going to find that a lot of people are asked sometimes, did the New Deal, of course, did the New Deal, end the Great Depression? And the answer to that is probably yes and no, but we'll get to that in a few seconds. So number 1, what lasting effect did the New Deal have on the United States? Americans went back to work. African Americans and women enjoyed some success in the workplace and society, and the Democratic Party emerges as the party of the working people. And that's how a lot of people saw it. What ultimately ended the New Deal? The American interest in the World War II, not specifically responsible, New Deal responsible for ending the Great Depression, but it does put a pretty good dent in it. But it was going to be that wartime production when jobs are created, and then American men, of course, go overseas, and job availability, of course, becomes increasingly high. So when you look at what ultimately ended the New Deal, it would be America's interest in World War II, which created the mobilization of industry to support the war effort, creating the abundance of jobs and demand for war and consumer products. So when you look at the New Deal, it did what it was supposed to do. And what it was supposed to do is to restore confidence in American people in their government. A lot of people have criticized, said it went too far. Some people said it didn't go far enough. But we're going to find at the end of the day, the New Deal makes FDR one of the most popular presidents, of course, in the history of the United States of America, if you're a Democrat. If you're a Republican, a lot of people look at him as being the start of some of the issues, of course, that are laid at the country's feet when it comes to entitlements, when it comes to big government. So when you're looking at that, it just depends on which side, of course, that you fall. That's the end of Lesson 6 from Unit 9, the New Deal. And what we want you to do, of course, is to go through and do your own research, of course, when it comes to the New Deal. Do not take my word for it. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, U.S. history from 1877 to present, and we'll see you next time.